Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Particle Accelerator podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow their business and accelerate their teams. I'm here with Chris Smith. Chris, will you please introduce yourself?
Thanks. Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Smith. I'm the founder of a consumer security company called Dfend, and I'm also the author of my first book called Privacy Pandemic, which came out late last year, discussing all things cybercrime and identity theft and all the things that most of us don't want to pay attention to. So I decided to put it into a book based on my own personal experience of going through it. So that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's cool. I love it when people write books about shared experience versus advice. I just recently got into that Gestalt principle, the principle
Yeah.
of shared experience over advice. And I find it far more powerful when you tell people, hey, this is what happened to me.
That
So
was the
that's
goal.
really cool that you approached a privacy cybersecurity book from that angle. So that's really cool. I hope we get to talk more about that.
Yeah, it was
Um,
quite a unique experience.
yeah, for sure. All right, well, we'll get into some deeper content here. So
No,
what tech trend has significantly impacted you or your industry, and how has your company responded?
I mean, this may sound pretty boilerplate, but obviously AI is advancing so quickly. I've been messing around with the latest version of ChatGPT just to see how powerful it's become in such a short amount of time. And especially in cybersecurity, I think AI has dramatically changed the landscape in terms of how quickly you can respond to deviations in user behavior or tracking anomalies to track down bad guys. And I think that AI is just going to continue to advance in a way that's going to enable way more people to be protected, because that's what I think about every day. And I think it's also going to enable companies to do more, to be more cyber ready to take on any attacks. But that also means that the bad guys are also using the tool. And, it's like, it's cyber warfare, who's gonna get there first. So I
Yeah.
think AI is going to change and enhance not only the cybersecurity business, and you can already see that. And you can also see that in identity protection services. Companies like Aura are using more AI-enabled components to try and protect people's identity. But again, on the other side, there's, the bad guys are still winning. And
Right.
the amount of data breaches that are happening on a consistent basis, and AI is powering a lot of that right now. So I think AI is it's going to be really interesting, right? In like
For sure.
24 months where
Yeah.
things are.
Yeah, what I'm seeing from where we sit is the LLMs are kind of coming to and maybe this is a little bit of a wishful thinking, just because if the change happens too rapidly, it will disambiguate or disrupt people who are trying to catch up. And I think we need a little time. Much in the same way, like our parents, they're kind of muggles when it comes to certain tech, right? The idea of writing code or whatever just kind of leaped ahead of the past generation. But we're seeing that the LLMs are benchmarking very similarly, and their capabilities are starting to really match up. So you mentioned ChatGPT 4.0 is there. Maybe I've again missed a release, but they're all kind of leveling at their capability level. And I think that'd be great. So we can figure out, which one has certain advantages, and just have a little bit of a minute to kind of study the impact of this. Um, but thank goodness, right? Because at that same trajectory, which is what most of the media is written off of, at that same trajectory, yes, it would get really weird, really crazy, really quick. So I'm kind of hoping for just a bit of a plateau so we can all kind of regroup and figure out how to apply some of this.
Yeah, I think it's just going to keep, my personal opinion is I think
Sure.
going to be on us to keep up.
Yeah.
Um, because I don't know if you've seen Bill Gates's new Netflix series. There's a entire episode on AI, and even, the C-level AI is like, all right, ChatGPT is like, we're moving really fast and we don't really know where the break should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
So,
sure. How have you seen that specifically show up in the cybersecurity world?
um, the way that I'm seeing it, because, I'm kind of like heads down in what we're focused on, is just the rapid response that we're able to address an anomaly and look at user behavior and go, this isn't Chris, this isn't right. Um, I think that there's tons of cybersecurity companies that are raising millions and millions of dollars on, you know, protecting servers and, you know, all these endpoints that are out there, and they're doing a really good job with it. And I think there's so many use cases that you can figure out by leveraging AI and all the information that's available. And so when I'm using ChatGPT or Claude or other services, I'm really trying to understand how to prompt it better so we
Hmm.
can try and understand what is happening in real time, on how to better protect users, and using AI and machine learning to effectively get ahead of what might be coming. So that's how
Right.
we're thinking about it. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, totally does. My older two sons are both in college. And so they're with this struggle point of, well, do I write a paper? At what point do I use AI to help me write a paper? So it seems like if they had it write it, if they gave it some, like said, hey, this is what I want to write, and they were creative in that endeavor, and then they had it write the paper, then they open the door for hallucinations. Um, and they don't know where the work is coming from. So they don't have the bibliography to support the work. But then there's also just the idea of revising their original work. So they write the paper and then they revise it, and now it's grammatically perfect. And they've basically spent half the time, because so much of your writing is the proofreading and the editing and making sure that you didn't make any mistakes.
Yeah.
So even just the act of writing, I mean, I don't know. I think just in a few months, I probably will forget how to write without some form of AI assistance, right? Whether it be revision or the brainstorming process or something. It's very much what a scientific calculator has done for math, or what the computer has done for math. Like, um, I worry about it making society dumber, and then the people, which will be cool because then we'll go through some kind of curve where the people who still know how to do like language translation and write code from scratch and all of that will be super valuable. But in that like adoption curve, that population gets alienated from value, right? Like, oh, I don't need good marketers that can write good copy. And so then that's an assumption that the market makes then to realize, hey, we need something to test this stuff and approve it and really know if it's producing the right thing.
Well,
Um,
that's why when I said earlier, I think you have to go back to, once you understand how you can use the tool as an enhancement to what you're doing, as long as you continue to keep your core strengths, I think that it's great. But I think that if people 100% rely on it to do their work, they're going to find out that that might not last very long, right? So
yeah.
especially for funds, I think that there are probably now AI tools that professors and schools and universities have to be able to check work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if I threw my book into ChatGPT and said clean it up, it would be a different version, even though I had an editor and, you know, what it
Totally.
is and all this stuff. It would be slightly different book.
Yeah. I ran a quick cycle on the AI authoring, the AI detection, and then the de-AIing, right? So there's kind of this process you could go through. All the de-AIing did is introduce mistakes that made me sound really like made the writing sound really dumb. And I'm reminded of like this, I'm going to date myself here, but there was a role playing game called Shadowrun. And the concept in there is as you increased your amount of cybernetic implants, you lost your humanity.
Mm.
So I think we're kind of, I think that's kind of what what you're alluding to there is as you use AI more, the humanness of what you're trying to do will decrease or become more synthetic. And then, if we rely on it too heavily, we might lose our humanity somewhere in the process.
Yeah. I mean, even Sam talks about that, like where's the line, right?
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but I do think, circling back, I do think AI and machine learning are going to have a tremendous impact, and it's already showing, especially in cybersecurity. And we're trying to figure out ways to enhance every person's security by leveraging it to help
Yeah.
be behind the scenes and protect people without them really knowing, that how the sauce is being made, right? So,
Yeah. Well, what other innovations are you guys betting on to drive your business growth? So really going forward in the future here.
I think for us, it has a lot to do with getting to this single view of one's identity. So our identity is not just our social security number and our home address. It's everything we do on our computers, on our devices. There's our digital identity. And that is very different than, worrying about where your mail is, right? So I think once we get to a point where we can map um, our identity across all the different services that we're leveraging, because, you and I are probably logged into 6 different tabs right now behind this Zoom screen. And, we might be in our work life in one tab, and we've got, maybe our personal life in another. And understanding that our identity is fluid and it just follows us everywhere. That's what the bad actors kind of hope for, that you're going to click on an old J. Crew or, some random email that you thought was from a Nike or whatever, and that it's going to impact your entire device. And so I think one of the things that we're really trying to figure out is how can we automate a person's identity security in their digital life across everything.
Right.
And if we can hone in on the automation where it's like, oh, we took care of that. Someone tried to attack you. Here's the information. We'll be good. So that's the automation pieces. But that comes with a lot of data and a lot of learning. And so once we get to a point where we feel like we have enough inputs, I think we're going to be a really good place.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, I was in online advertising early in my career. And so the power of the cookie, right? We were daisy chaining pixels, and I worked for a travel media company, and if you searched, if you went to a travel search, likely we had code embedded in that travel search partner. And so you searched New York to London, and we knew, like, man, you're ripe for Virgin Atlantic. And so we were writing 7 different cookies in multiple layers. And then everywhere you went on the internet, you're seeing international travel airline brands. And some of that has really squashed down. The browsers are now protecting people, not kind of allowing that. But then the online advertisers have created more identity sharing services. So it's still happening. It's just happening in a slightly different way. And there are some regulations that are starting to creep in that people are having to adapt to with consent and all of those things. How have you seen that shift? And I'm really talking about advertising privacy. Have you seen any shift there, or are you giving people guidance not to give consent, or does that open up anything? I'm only curious because of my background in online advertising.
Well, I was in the digital advertising space for a long time too. So transitioning from I was early in the video advertising space. So we were trying to figure out how to distribute ads and content together. So that was, early days, like YouTube type stuff. So I worked both on the supply side. So for the publishers, I worked for the demand side, so the advertisers, and I also worked in between at an ad network. And I was always responsible for video, mobile, and later toward the end of my advertising uh, stint, I was responsible for advanced TV and programmatic, or the automation of buying TV from a digital component. So Google, obviously, if you've been paying attention, they've been talking about getting rid of cookies for a long time.
Right.
That scared the industry, as I'm sure you're aware.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of companies started building these privacy-based digital advertising solutions, and there are now standards set out by the IAB, and companies like the Trade Desk and others are leading this identity push. And so when Google decided that they were going to keep cookies, a lot of my friends that are still in the industry were like, what's going on? We just spent the last 3 years developing tools for a more private and secure advertising experience. And I think that their frustration is warranted, but I always talk to them about, look, people are becoming more aware of their digital privacy and their rights, things like GDPR and the CCPA. There are additional identity and privacy laws in countries like South Africa and, Asia. There's a couple. Singapore has a data privacy and security policy. So I think it ultimately moves the industry further to less singularity in terms of identifying you or me. And that's the thing, because no one likes to be followed with travel ads or Nike ads or whatever I just looked at constantly. Right.
Right.
I think that consent is going to become even more important as we go.
Right.
But that's coming from someone that wrote a book about privacy.
Right, right, for sure.
Oh, I think it's needed. And I think that my friends that are now, the execs and probably some of your friends now at these companies, I think they're doing a really good job of being mindful that we have to take one's privacy and our identity into everything that we're doing, from frequency capping to the types of ads to everything, whatever
Yeah,
device.
yeah, totally. Kind of circling back to your present, to the present, what do you feel like the most significant gaps between your ambitions are and realities of today?
Well, I have many ambitions. So if we're gonna if we're gonna focus on the on Dfend and my book, um, I think one of the challenges that any startup goes through is, like, you have this great idea, you start to get customers, you start to do testing, you start to get some data, and the market moves really quickly. And so, as you know, as a founder, the founder journey is, you can't go founder mode all the time. There's been a lot of talk about that lately. You got to get in there and do a lot of work. But you have to stay ahead. And I think one of the challenges, just being candid, that we're seeing at Defend to get to where we want to go, is this idea of how to fully protect one's identity. And the way that we see it is, you need to have strong B2B partnerships with where people are, knowing that when they're logging in at home, they don't have a firewall. They probably don't know how to use or using a VPN. Most people are not using two-factor authentication. And so a lot of times the bad actors are going to leverage our personal accounts to break into our business accounts. And so that just causes this major storm of problems for not only the user, but for the organization. And so we're trying to figure out ways to make integration and automation really seamless for the user to connect to all their apps and services that they use. And that's just going to take time. So for us to fully get to where I want to go and where we as a team want to go, it's really around integration and API driven tasks, essentially, that we have to do. And then you got
Yeah.
to bring.
So B2B partnerships as a cure for what really sounds like a consumer education problem that's still very present.
Yeah, right. So, like, if someone gets a hold of my credentials, like, how many times have you seen someone say, someone took over my Facebook account, or whatever? Most people aren't thinking about that. So I think the biggest challenge that we have is getting people to understand that we're, especially on the partnership side, is, we have to see certain types of data to really protect not only you, the company, and your employees or your end user customers, but also, consumers. Because if I get hacked for example, my iCloud was compromised. I had no idea. And my parents' home Wi-Fi router was breached, which means that every time I went home to see my family, I'd connect to the router and not think about it. And then the bad actors were scraping all my updated passwords and user credentials, and that just kept their target going, right?
Right.
So you don't understand that, and if you're not constantly getting notified, or even if your bank doesn't know that this is going on because it looks like Chris, right? He's in the same location. Maybe he's got a new device. There's all these different mechanics that are happening, especially in identity and security. And so we're just trying to find the simplest entry point to partner with everybody, and that's going to be through a lot of API.
Interesting. Um, well, what do you think the biggest challenge is to maintaining your competitive edge in the industry? And maybe it's a similar answer, but yeah, I like to see kind of what you're thinking about and staying at the front.
Well, I think first off, you have to be aware of what others are doing, right? When you look at most companies, or excuse me, when I look at most companies, they have, in most cases, startups have two or three things that are really their bread and butter, and their differentiator. And then they add on all the other things that everybody else is doing, right? So we have a customer that wants us to do this, so we got to build that. The way I look at it is, if you spend too much time focusing on what your competitors are doing, you're not building your own business. You have to be aware, right? You got to be aware of what they're doing. And
Yeah.
you got to read, you got to read, what's going on. And if you have an idea of where you want to go, if you're so focused, in my opinion, if you're so focused on what they're doing, you're not building your business. You're
Right.
not sitting down and talking to your customers and figuring out, how can we take what we already have and enhance what they need. Right. So I've, maybe this is me as a, as a sports guy, but like, I just try not to focus too much on what others are doing. I got to nail what we're doing. And then
Yeah,
if we,
your unique value proposition.
yeah. And if we deliver, that's what we got to do.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Well, as you lead different people, how do you approach risk management when implementing something new or addressing a new cutting edge technology?
I think probably, 10 years ago, I would just go for it. I'd say, let's worry about it later. Now I'd take a much more calculated approach. As a founder, there's a lot of things that you want to do, but that's why you bring really smart people around you to say no, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or we can do it, but here's how we get there. And it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be, 3 sprints of a development cycle, right? And we need A, B, and C to make it really happen. So while 10, when I first started, my first company was a digital video and content distribution company, and I knew the business, so I just did whatever. Now I've moved into this different world where I really need experts to, paint a better picture about what my ambition might be about a new product or something I'm thinking about at 3 in the morning, right? As most founders do, we all have those moments. Um, so now it's really more, hey, what do you think of this? And then I get the team to kind of chime in, and either I'm crazy or, yeah, that's a great idea and we can do it, but here's how we get there. So
Right.
now I'm in my mid 40s, I take a little bit more time and I'm much more calculated.
Yeah, for sure. I find it that it's the Howard Hughes curse is what I call it, right? You come in with a bright idea that could either really shape it could be a really big
Destroy.
and yeah, or destroy, right? And your team oftentimes doesn't know which bright idea, which Howard Hughesy idea you've had to take action on or help you problem solve through. So I think I've definitely seen at times where like, hey, let's, and then all of a sudden there's people running in different directions. And what I really meant was, hey, here's an idea I'd love feedback on. And I said, like, I think, a good team will kind of understand, like, okay, cool. I hear your idea. I respect that as a really great idea. Let me tell you what I really think about it. And having that honesty within your team is huge.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've learned to do, and this was very hard for me a while ago, was I put a timeline on it. Hey, I've
Mm,
got this thing I want to do. Let's take 2 weeks and figure out, let's just have a meeting in 2 weeks. And if we all agree that we want to move forward, great. If we don't, then we move on from it. Because again, you have to get back to your core business, which is your customers, and delivering for them. You can have a million ideas, but if you don't have consensus, then it makes it a lot. You don't want to be pushing something through all the time. Now, sometimes you got to make a decision because you really feel it in your gut, and hopefully it works out.
right. Well, that's a great segue to the next question is how do you approach connecting your roadmap, your technology roadmap, or just your roadmap in general of organizational changes to your overall business strategy? Do you have a framework that you use or a guiding principle? How do you kind of plan for the future?
So when we started to Dfend, one of the first things that I did was I went to potential customers, and I spent a lot of time talking to them about what I want to do. What do you think about this? How would you use this? So a lot of what we've already built has been really thought through and validated by customers. And
Mm,
even when I worked for other people or in my previous company, you always have an idea of what the roadmap might look like, you know, but until you actually sit down with customers that are willing to pay for it, like that's really what drives your roadmap, right? What, in my opinion, what are customers looking for? What are they willing to test? What are they willing to be an early adopter on? And ultimately, um, what are they willing to pay for? So
right.
that really, because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a CTO, I'm a business development and strategy and sales guy. That's who I am.
Right.
So if I, even back to your previous question, if I have an idea, I have a group of friends that are executives at companies that I'd like to work with or working with. I call them and I say, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah. Love it.
Right. And because then they feel like they're part of the development. And then it's like, great, we met with 10 customers, 8 of them want this feature or think that's a good idea, or four of them are like, yeah, that's okay, but you should do this. It really helps understand where you need to go. And I think that ultimately you have to listen to your customers, but also, build things into the product that you want to see too, that'll map back to what people may pay for. To
Right.
me, it's always about what the customer thinks or wants.
Yeah, totally. There is a dichotomy there between the kind of Steve Jobs. Nobody would have known they needed an iPhone until I gave them an iPhone. Or the Henry Ford, people would be still riding around on horse-driven buggies if they didn't know an automobile exists. As kind of one end of the dichotomy, I really think this kind of an innovation dilemma is, okay, do I really bring something that nobody's ever thought of before? And then there's the customer-driven roadmap on the other side. And I do think the answer is somewhere in between. It's kind of listening to both, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, look, everyone had a phone. He just killed it, made it better. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, BlackBerry was, at the top, and Steve just said, nope. Right.
Yep.
So while maybe not everyone knew they needed an iPhone, Steve knew that we needed a better device. We needed a
Sure.
better solution. So, and I'm sure that that just didn't come out of nowhere, right?
Sure.
He used every tool on the marketplace, from the brick phone, Motorola, to, the Razor that flipped open, to
Yep.
BlackBerry. I mean, what's the one with Ashton Kutcher where there's that scene outside and he's using the Sony Walkman and he throws it in the garbage on the
Yep.
way out? You know, I really admire Apple and Steve Jobs. But you have to understand that, you're trying to figure out what the best solution is, and they've done it, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what lessons have you learned from tech initiatives that failed to deliver expected value?
I think it goes back to your ambition question. When I went through my personal experience of getting hacked, I wanted to take on the world and go after every bad guy out there that was scamming people out of their life savings, or, listening in on people's, phone calls and invading their privacy. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned from that was from my team. I had to go out and educate myself. I mean, I picked up the phone and I called Richard Clark's office. If you don't know who Richard Clark is, he's the national security advisor for both Bushes, Clinton, and he's still out there advising organizations and, government. And I was, at the time, I was just looking for someone to help me. And what I'm trying to get to is that if you're not really honing in on the technical aspect of how you're going to solve that particular issue, you just, going back to your roadmap question and talking to customers about what's feasible or not, that's what we experienced largely in the first kind of prototype that we built for Dfend. It's like, no, this is the way it's got to be. And then you start talking to the venture community or customers, and they're like, we would never use that. Or why don't you build it? Why didn't you go this way? So I think once you understand that everything that you build is not always going to be the right technical fit out of the gate, but if you go back to at least my core principles of, like, I got to talk to my customers, I got to talk to people like yourself about what tech solutions are really going to, help scale and speed up development. As a business guy, you don't understand all the technical components. I have a good understanding of it, but that's why you have a really great team. And I think team is important to overcome any technical hurdles or understanding of how things should work, right? Like, sometimes, have you ever been like, why isn't this just working? Well, there's a reason it's just not working the way you want
Yeah,
it to.
for
You
sure.
haven't learned how to use it, or you're not using the tool properly, right? So there's a lot of things you have to overcome. But I think at the end of the day, for me, team is so important, because your co-founder, or, CTO or CISO can sit you down and say, okay, Chris, I know you want it to be A, B, and C, and they can get there, but we have to do D, E, and Y first. Then we'll get
Yeah.
there.
There's this idea of understanding the supply chain, whether you're building a consumer electronic or whether you're building a software product. There's this idea of the supply chain that already exists that could give you the components for that thing. And when you have an idea, you don't often know the supply chain leading into that. And just about any big tech advancement that we've seen came out of an understanding, a deep understanding of the supply chain, the things that could be behind the scenes to give that new product like the unique twist or the we spend a lot of time with people talking about a periodic table of business tools, which is really the supply chain around building a company, like all the software that could go into systematizing the customer experience. And that's kind of what you're talking about is you have to do that research to know what are the suppliers into this vision that you have. And without understanding that, you'll either start creating stuff from scratch that doesn't need to be created from scratch, or you'll try to put something that already exists in the market in front of your customer and then go, well, this isn't different. Like I could get this from any other, any of your competitors. And that really is like and you also made another good point, which is that's one kind of advice, understanding the market and the supply chain that already exists for whatever your idea is, whatever you're trying to innovate. But just that talking to others, right? Like getting advice. I'm in a handful of masterminds, two primarily, one for service company owners and then one for faith-based business owners. And I get enormous amounts of value from those two masterminds. I mean, they just like leaping me ahead in terms of my abilities, my capability as a founder, and the encouragement to leave my comfort zone and try things that might work for me. Um, so yeah, both of those two things, the finding people who understand the supply chain in your space and then, leaning on others who've been there and done that is huge.
Yeah, I just one quick thing on the supply chain. I think one of the well, I know one of the reasons that I wanted to try and innovate on consumer security was the amount of data breaches and companies that are all part of that supply chain, right?
Yep.
If all of a sudden my mom receives a phishing email and she clicks on it, like the movie The Beekeeper, and it wipes out her entire life savings, who's responsible for that?
Right.
Right. So what I was trying to do with my very experienced team was how do we innovate on that so that someone like my mom or, whoever, doesn't have to go through some type of experience like that, because in the cybercrime world, no one wants to take responsibility for what happened. And it leaves us completely exposed because the average person doesn't understand the supply chain of tools that they need to use to try and defend themselves.
That's cool.
So that's how I looked at it. And so it was like, we got to do this, we got to do this. And, we did a lot of that. And a lot of that is now coming into the PRD and our product roadmap. And I'm glad we did it, but I learned a lot because I was, a PR guy in the NFL to a, digital advertising executive, and now I'm in security. So that's a different journey.
Sure.
Right. I'm so glad I have a great team.
Yeah. And with that emphasis on team, what are some ways that you cultivate culture of innovation and fluency in your organization?
I want people to bring me as many ideas that they can validate as possible. Right. And I want everyone to be as innovative as possible all the time, as long as we understand that we still have a core business to run in any business. I think, you could, you could read something and that could spark anything. And so like the way I try and foster any innovation, whether it's for working for other people or, for myself, has been bring me the best idea and let's see if we can make it happen. Right. And if we all come in on it together, let's do it. I think that you have to give people time to be creative.
Right.
Right. I think people need, we're not just looking at spreadsheets all day or making phone calls or whatever. People are very creative and you have to figure out who's going to help you do A, B, or C. And if someone brings a great idea, you got to listen to it. So I just, you are brought into an organization. I've been brought into an organization to do A, B, and C. But if you can find something that can help innovate or scale or, whatever it might be, let's hear it. And
Yeah.
let people be creative.
Yeah. Cool. Totally. Well, what's an advice you would give to somebody starting their journey with either business ownership, cybersecurity, digital transformation? Just what do you give the young bloods? What do you tell them?
Well, the first thing I would say is, I would say you got to go for it. Right. You got to go for it. If you got an idea and you can get people behind your idea, you can raise a little money from friends and family, or you want to put in the time and the effort to pursue an opportunity that you really are passionate about and you believe in, then you got to go for it. But at the same time, you got to prepare for it, right? So let's say you're at a current company and you got a great idea for a startup, right? Instead of just, in my opinion, some people have a different opinion. Instead of quitting right away and being like, "Hey, I'm going to do this," and you haven't started yet, take the time to put together a plan, get the right people involved. And then when you feel comfortable with what you're going to do and you've aligned, team and, the supply chain, technologies that you need and the advisors and the mentors that you need, the community that you need to support you, then make the decision. But as someone who started 2 companies and been part of 3 acquisitions in the advertising space, I think you got to go for it because we're only here a short amount of time, but you got to be smart about it. You can't just go for it. You got to have a plan in place, and you gotta get your team together and your community to support you. So I would say go for it every time.
Awesome. Well, cool. So I like to ask us a couple questions to get to know you a little bit better. And one of the ways I do that is, what was your first job? Like for me as a paper route, that's how I made my first dollar. Paper route, babysitting, you name it. What was your first job?
I think my first job was lawn mowing, and
Hmm.
then I graduated to paper route. And then I think I was, when you're in, fifth, sixth grade, you're selling stuff door to door to try and raise money for your school or your sports team. So I remember working, with my neighbor's lawn and other neighbors' lawns, and that was how I think I charged $7. So I think
Yeah,
that was first job.
that was the exact cost of my paper route. Like it was $7. I kept going around and asking everybody. I think there's a movie like this. So, hey, I need my $7.
Yeah.
What toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career wise today?
Nothing. I thought I was going to play quarterback in the NFL.
Oh
That
yeah.
that was my dream. I was very fortunate. I got a scholarship to play football in college, which was great. But I never would have thought I'd be sitting here thinking about cybersecurity, identity, privacy. It's just not where I envisioned my life going. My first job out of college, I was doing media relations and public relations for the NFL. So I've come quite a long way in the last 20 years or so. But never would have thought I'd be sitting here talking to you about stuff like this.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, what was your favorite and least favorite course in school?
Math. I
What was
was good.
your
I was good at it. I just hated being in class and
uh-huh.
just didn't enjoy the process of it. I just wanted to get it done and move on. Yeah, so math at the time was my least favorite course.
Cool. And what was your favorite?
I'd probably say English. I learned a lot about writing structure and, got to read a lot of amazing books and worked for the school newspaper, both in high school and college. So I think English was a really good artistic way for me to express things that I was thinking about or wanted to write about. So that was fun for me then. And I'm still
Yeah.
writing today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cybersecurity, I'm always amazed how much writing is involved, at least on the corporate side. All this the policies, the procedures, the audits, there's so much writing involved. Um, cybersecurity.
That's
What
why I have
quote
a
from
great team. They write all the technical specs we talk
yeah,
about. And then I say, okay, you've got the SOC 2 compliance and you've got all those, security clearance things. You can write it and we'll have someone make sure it's
that's right.
properly.
That's cool. What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
That's a great question. Um, I'm probably going to butcher it, but I'm not sure if it was Mandela, but it's like, uh, to go fast, go alone, or, to go far, go together. I don't remember if
I
that's,
love that. Yeah, no, that's a good one. It's a really
I
good one.
don't remember if it was Mandela, but that one's the first one that kind of came to mind.
Cool. What do you think the greatest invention or discovery has been in the past 300 years?
Great discovery in the last 300 years. Um, I don't know if it's a discovery, but it's more of an entrepreneur thing, the ability to fly,
Mm.
go planes, bring people's worlds, and you travel and changes your life. So
Yeah.
imagine if my brothers hadn't done that. At some point someone would have figured it out. But I think that that really opened up the world to everyone, right? That's the first thing I think of.
Yeah, no, that's super true. And what I'm finding as I travel for business is there's no central meeting place anymore. We are fully remote company. And so even if I wanted to have like an in-person function, there'd be a lot of flying that would have to take place to get everybody into a central place, right?
Yeah,
So, um, I'm even finding like, hey, I want to meet with you. Well, shoot, man, I live in the country now. I have to travel into New York to sit down with you. Let's just have a Zoom call, right? Like
yeah.
the flying's almost become the way that you even get to a meeting versus driving or it's just everything's become planes, trains, and automobiles for in person lately.
Well, I mean, the way I look at it is imagine, before a flight, you didn't really understand most of what was going on in your state, your region, and now you can travel the world. I mean, electricity and a lot of those other things are extremely important to us surviving. Um,
Right.
I travel probably as often as you, and it really does make an impact in terms of your relationships, especially in business, because you can accomplish so much more in 10 minutes sitting
Oh,
down face
totally.
to face than you can on 30 Zoom calls. It's
Yeah.
sometimes that interpersonal connection that we need, and that's changed a lot, obviously, with COVID. But I travel way more now, and I think people are starting to get back to that.
Yeah. A couple of my CEO buddies have really gotten into the vibe board. You've probably come across it, the vibe board. They're basically fallen in love with the whiteboard again because there's now like a virtual solution. It shares really well. You can have the camera points at you as you're writing on the board and they can see both the board and you at the same time. It's like really we've come to this, right? With just if you know about the vibe board, you tell everybody it's kind of like CrossFit and the vibe board has suddenly become this huge thing and I wasn't paid to say that.
That's all good.
Well, if people like what you've had to share today, how should they connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my personal website, christopherasmith.com. Or if you want to follow more information about my book, you can find that on Amazon. The title of the book is called Privacy Pandemic. And I'd be happy to help anyone that's looking for information.
Cool. All right, well, it's been great chatting with you today. It's just been awesome to hear about your experience coming from getting hacked or having that identity theft issue to now really digging in to help others not only with your book but um, with your just with your company. So very inspiring. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Great to be here.